This episode is brought to you by Set for Life Insurance. Protect yourself against life setbacks with Set for Life Insurance. Set for Life Insurance gets you disability and life insurance at a reduced cost with their exclusive discounts. Now that's why I use them. Visit www.setforlifeinsurance.com and tell them Dr. Darko sent you.
And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, this time it's different. There is something very different about this event that we are not addressing. And I felt it was, this was fueled by this refusal to openly and honestly discuss how racism is impacting our society.
What's good, everyone? This is Dr. Nee Darko, the Doc Outside the Box. Happy New Year, and thank you very much for joining me on another episode of Docs Outside the Box. This is going to be a good one. The voice clip that you heard in the beginning of the show is the voice of Dr. Brian Williams. At the time, he was a trauma surgeon at the storied Parkland Hospital in Dallas, Texas. He made these comments about 4 days after his life was forever changed on July 7th of 2016. Now, before this, Dr. Brian Williams was your typical amazing trauma surgeon, practicing at Parkland Hospital, the same hospital that treated JFK after he was assassinated, the same hospital that has contributed literally so much to the practice of surgery as well as trauma surgery. This is also the largest surgery residency in the country. And Dr. Brian Williams literally in one night could be doing a gallbladder as well as taking care of a patient who had a gunshot wound to his heart. So it's an amazing practice. It's an amazing place for him to work at. He's also a husband, he's a father, and he's a son. But his life was forever changed on July 7th, 2016. A peaceful protest rally by the Next Generation Action Network occurred in Dallas, Texas on that day. Now, let's set the stage a little bit. Just a little bit over a week prior to this, the deaths of Philando Castile, as well as Alton Sterling, both black men killed by police officers on video. Now, Philando Castile's death was streamed on Facebook Live, but these two deaths were literally were being replayed in our living rooms. After the protest, 25-year-old Micah Johnson opened fire on Dallas PD, unfortunately killing 5 of these officers and injuring 9 more. The majority of these police officers who were injured ended up being taken to Parkland Hospital, the same hospital where Dr. Brian Williams works. And also let me add another layer to this. He's the only African-American trauma surgeon on staff, and he was on call that night. After taking care of these police officers, he was thrust into the national spotlight, kind of unprepared, and he was doing news interviews, and it was very clear that the events of July 7th had affected him greatly. If you go back and if you look at these videos, you can see that there are clear times when he is holding back tears, choking back tears during his interviews, but the most notable of these interviews happened 4 days later on July 11th, when a very distressed Dr. Williams, when he made his comments that really shook up the social media world as well as the news circuit. And in essence, he described how much it affected him that these police officers were injured, as well as the police officers who died and their families. He talked about how he doesn't condone violence against police officers and will even defend them. But also at the same time, he also described how he understood the anger, the distrust, as well as the frustration with law enforcement. So after that interview, he made the news and interview circuit, got a chance to meet President Obama, and then literally went back to being Dr. Brian Williams. But a year later, 2017, pretty much 6 months ago, he shocked the world again when he announced that he was leaving Parkland. He's resigning with no other job prospects. And this sparked a lot of rumors. It sparked a lot of not controversy, but just people were talking as to why would such a well-trained, an amazing trauma surgeon who had just handled one of the most harrowing events in our history, why would he leave this facility? But no job prospects in hand. And he left and he started writing about this, and he wrote that he had an urge to do something more. And as a result, he now finds himself on the speaking circuit. He speaks to law enforcement. He speaks to high schools. He speaks to colleges. He speaks to churches, anyone who will listen. He also is taking on social activism. That is now a priority for him, and has even started a foundation for that. And this is all, in essence, basically just to say that he is a doc outside the box. So there's a lot in this episode that you're going to learn, you're going to be affected by. And you're just listen to the episode and you'll hear how just even recounting the events still affects him. He's also received some negative correspondence from this event. And I suspect that this podcast episode will be polarizing for people also. But before you light it up, before you use your Twitter fingers or whatever social media that you're going to use, my challenge to you is put yourself in Dr. Brian Williams' shoes. What would you do? What would you say if you were in his place? And look, there's only two roads in front of you. There's the safe road, but if you take the safe road and not mention the obvious, then you take the chance, or not even you take the chance, you will miss a golden opportunity to spark a national debate, spark a national conversation, and further discussion on something that's plagued this country for hundreds of years. And then obviously, if you take the other road, then obviously there's going to be a backlash that goes along with it. So this is an important episode for me. This is my first time actually interviewing a doctor one-on-one, face-to-face. And also, this is something that I suspect will affect you all in a very positive way, I hope. And I'm looking forward to your feedback. And without further ado, let's get on with the interview. Here with another episode of Docs Outside the Box. Really excited to have my next guest on the show, Dr. Brian Williams. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. Good to see you again, man.
Man, trying to get you on this show was crazy, man. This is a long time coming. It's something that I've been anticipating for a long period of time. I know that there's been so many different stories about what happened to you last year on July 7th. And I know this is an opportunity for us to learn more about you, the real Dr. Brian Williams, as well as what happened that evening and some of the things that have happened afterwards. Because, you know, the reason why I have you on this show is obviously as you're an excellent trauma surgeon, you do excellent clinical work. But as of this past year, you decided to do something that was completely out the box.
Right.
Kind of sent shockwaves through the trauma community here in Dallas, Texas, as well as through the country. And this is an opportunity for you to tell your story. And this is an opportunity for pre-meds, med students, residents, and young attendings to kind of understand that it's okay to pivot and for us to learn a little bit more about the reasons why you did so, just so they can understand that, hey, if I ever have these feelings, maybe I'm not the only one. Someone else has done it, and you've landed on your feet.
Sure.
Okay. So before we get too much into the nitty gritty,
I'll just say, man, I'm honored to be on your show, and I'm a fan of the podcast. I've been following it for a while. And I'm flattered that you said I sent shockwaves throughout the trauma community. I don't know about that, but definitely it's an honor to be here. So thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. But look, before we get too much into, the nitty gritty, let's learn a little bit about you. So Brian, or Dr. Brian, tell us about where you're from. Tell us a little bit about your history, man. I want to know more about you.
Well, I always describe myself as an Air Force brat, so all these military kids out there can appreciate that. I was born in an Air Force hospital, and our family moved every couple of years to Air Force bases around the country and around the world, actually. We lived in Japan for a while, spent several years in Hawaii, and after all that, we landed in Virginia, down in Hampton, Virginia. We moved there during my junior year of high school. Okay. And that is where my parents decided to retire. So they are still there, 30-something years later.
Now, the audience doesn't know this, but I got a chance to actually kind of tour your house, and I stayed with you overnight. and I got a chance to see some of your childhood pictures. There's a picture where you're in your drum, your drum
Right.
marching, band outfit, and it has, Hampton on there and stuff. Tell us about what it's like in Hampton growing up.
Well, I was there. Like I said, I was there for 2 years, and people know I'm a drummer. I've been huge into music my entire life, and I was snare drummer in the marching band, and played drum set and a variety of rock bands, rock influenced bands. So that I had a good time playing a lot of music. Hampton, I was there for 2 years, essentially, junior year and senior year of high school. So I can't say I really grew up there. I kind of made a quick little stop. Then I left to go to college. I went to the Air Force Academy for undergrad.
That's in Colorado?
That's in Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Okay.
And while I was there, I studied aeronautical engineering. And so my background is in engineering. I didn't plan to go into medicine. It was never something that even crossed my mind. And there's an important lesson there about, young black men aspiring to be things that they see. And having never seen black doctors, especially male doctors, and it never occurred to me that I could actually go into that field.
So, but you became an aeronautical engineer, so that's a big deal in its own sense too.
Right, but I was a good student. I was into math, and it never crossed my mind that I couldn't do engineering. And it's odd that you say that. I never thought about it that way. But my father was in the Air Force. When I started applying to the different various academies, I applied to the Naval Academy in West Point, Air Force Academy, and I was accepted at both Naval Academy and the Air Force Academy. And I chose the Air Force Academy because that's what I knew growing up, and I was interested in airplanes, and just seemed like the natural fit. Why I didn't feel dissuaded from pursuing an aeronautical engineering degree versus medicine, that's an interesting question, which I didn't really consider until you just brought it up just now.
Well, how long were you an engineer for?
I'd say I'm still an engineer. I got engineering in my blood. But working as an engineer, that was 6 years.
6 years?
Yeah.
Okay, so then when did you get the I want to be a doctor bug then?
I was around age 25.
Wow, so that was a complete shift, a complete 180 turn.
Right.
Did I get my math right? Is it 180 or 360?
It's 180.
Okay, 180.
So you're clearly pre-med while I had to do a lot of math.
Okay. Oh, it's like that? Okay, all right. So you decided that you wanted to be a doctor.
Right.
So obviously you're a non-traditional student.
Correct.
You went back, you did your prereqs and everything.
Well, actually, I did not have to. Here is the reality about the core curriculum at least at the Air Force Academy, is that we all take a pretty broad core, whether you're going into engineering or history or English. As an engineering major, I took a lot of humanities, art history, philosophy. And if you're going to humanities major, you're going to have to take aeronautical engineering and math. So all the prereqs that you need for medical school, I had them all, except for biochemistry was the one I probably would not have had, except that for my first year at the academy, I was a chemistry major, so I had that class as well. I took it again just to prepare for the MCATs. So yes, I was non-traditional, but I had the core requirements already to apply to med school.
Got you. And where did you go to med school at?
I went to the University of South Florida, which is in Tampa.
USF. Okay. So you're in medical school, you're doing your thing. When did you decide you wanted to be a surgeon?
So I don't know is your audience, are they all doctors? Are they non-medical?
These are pre-meds, med students, residents, all the way up.
All right. So when you're in medical school, you have your third year back, well, at least back then, you did 2 years in the classroom and then 2 years clinical. And that third year that's that critical year where you start actually doing what you think of as being a doctor, where you're taking care of patients. And my first rotation, you rotate through surgery, family medicine, obstetrics. My first rotation was surgery. And then part of that rotation, which was 2 months, we did a rotation on trauma surgery. And I still remember that the second day of my trauma rotation, I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do with my medical career.
So you wasn't scared of blood or nothing like that?
It just grabbed me. The pace, the decision making, you just taking care of the sickest patients that come through the door.
That's what I'm talking about.
I liked being in the ICU as well. I mean, we were putting in. I remember the residents having me put in lines, or not putting in lines, but chaining lines over wire. I did that yeah, exactly.
That's what I'm talking about, man.
And my people, like the surgeons that were my role models, I felt like I was at home with this group. So it grabbed me, and I just never let go.
So you never looked back. You decided that you wanted to be a general surgeon. Where'd you go and do your residency at?
I did my residency at Brigham and Women's Hospital, which is one of Harvard Medical School's teaching hospitals. They have several teaching hospitals.
Is it Harvard or Harvard?
For me, it's Harvard. Okay.
All right. So then after Harvard, you decided that you wanted to do, or excuse me, one of the Harvard affiliates at Brigham, you decided that you wanted to do trauma surgery as your specialty, and you decided that you wanted to do a fellowship, right? Get some additional training. So that's when you came down to the A, right? You came down to the A and got some flavor, and you did your fellowship at Grady Memorial Hospital with Emory, and that's where we met.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. And if the audience is listening, so me and Dr. Williams go way back. So we're talking 2010?
Yeah.
2010.
2009 actually.
2009. I am in my 4th year as a general surgery resident, I believe, going into my 5th year. Dr. Williams is doing his fellowship there. He's killing it. He's knocking things out the park and stuff. And I decided to come and talk to him about my I'm going to be applying to fellowships. And I give him a list of all the programs that I'm going to be applying to. He literally looks at me, looks at the list, and literally, I think you either ripped it up or you slapped me across the face with it on both sides of my mouth. It was like, what are you thinking about? How can you go from Grady to these no-name places?
Right.
And then you also looked at my essay also, right? And you're like, yeah, this is trash. So I had to get back to him a more competitive list. And I got to him a more competitive essay, and the rest is history. I ended up at University of Miami. So I just want to say thank you for that. You provided mentorship to me. Who knows where I would have been if I didn't go there. So I want to say thank you for that. So we developed a relationship then, and here we are 7 years later.
And I think it's an important lesson there because I had no idea how that influenced you until you told me that. And thank you for sharing that with me. But you never know. Like one encounter with somebody can change the course of their life or their career.
Oh, absolutely.
So always make time for someone that is looking for direction or mentorship or advice.
Absolutely. So you do 2 years at Grady,
right?
At Grady, and then afterwards you end up going to the Grady of Dallas, Texas, Parkland Hospital.
Right.
Okay. Tell us about that experience.
So I moved to Dallas to work at Parkland Hospital. I wanted to be at a hospital that had high clinical volume, high acuity trauma, but also served indigent patients. And I also wanted to be involved with teaching residents and students and fellows. So I had this, clinical draw here to Parkland Hospital and this academic draw to Dallas through a UT Southwestern Medical Center. It just provided everything that when I thought about what I wanted to do with my career in medicine, everything was provided here in Dallas. It never occurred to me to not work at a hospital that wasn't, a Grady-esque type facility. And there's a handful of those within the country, and so I had a very limited list about where I would plan to practice when the time came.
Okay, so you're doing your thing here. You are basically taking out gallbladders, taking out gunshot or helping people who've been shot, stabbed. You're basically as general as you can be from a general surgery standpoint, where you're taking care of very sick people who can die any second to people who need their appendix taken out, right?
Yeah, and I think it's important to explain to people, like when you say you're a trauma surgeon, that's a very powerful identity.
Well, people keep saying, "Oh yeah, so you work in ER, right?" Like,
exactly.
Nah, son.
But we're general surgeons, and we do general surgery, emergency surgery, trauma surgery, critical care. So the breadth of what we do, I think, is something that we as a specialty need to better explain that to the lay public.
Absolutely. I
mean, I saw there were several articles about me that describe me as an ER physician. It's a distinct specialty. We work closely together, but it's distinct from what we do. And whose fault is that? I think it's ours, right?
Right. You're absolutely right. Now let's fast forward a little bit. Things are going good here. You're enjoying it. You're settling yourself into the Dallas community. You have a very vibrant I wouldn't say practice, but you're doing very well. And because we, as trauma surgeons, don't really have a practice. We do work. We come to work, and we bring a lunch box, and we come to work, and we check in and we check out. So I want to talk to you about the evening of July 7th, 2016. I know that this is a very emotional part for you. This is so many bunch of emotions go through you at this moment. But I want to kind of take and paint a picture for the audience, allow you to tell your story as to what happened that evening. So let's start at the beginning, right? This is supposed to be a 12-hour shift for you that evening at Parkland, correct?
Correct.
Right. So we're talking about July 7th. You're starting your shift at 7 o'clock. Take us from there. Take us from a little bit even before then. Like, you get coffee, or did you get something to eat before then? How'd that go?
Right. And we do 5 p.m. to 7 a.m. if you do the overnight shift. Typically, I work 24-hour shifts. That's what I prefer to do. I don't like splitting them up. I like to be on call with the residents for the entire shift. This night, I agreed to do the overnight shift because one of my partners needed a change in the schedule. So I said, sure, I'll do the overnight shift. When I came in the night, there was no expectation about what was on my part was about to happen. I come in, I drive to work, I stop off, grab my dinner on the way in, come in, drop off my stuff in the call room, change into my scrubs, find the person that's on that day, get sign out, let the residents know I'm here, let the nurses know that I'm here, and I get to work. And the first thing we're getting ready to do is to take a patient back that had acute appendicitis, do an appendectomy.
Okay, so that basically, you met the patient before, patient's getting ready to go back, and you're about to, in essence, take out a patient's appendix, but you're at a teaching hospital.
Correct.
So you're working with residents. And as a matter of fact, you're not just at any teaching hospital. This is the largest general surgery residency in the country, correct?
Exactly.
So this is a huge place. People are getting operated on. So you're going to help train a resident through this process.
Right.
Okay.
And which is, a tremendous source of satisfaction for what I do is, watching these residents. And actually that night I had a fellow who was on with me. So he's already completed his general surgery training, and he's going to take the junior resident through it because essentially he can be in private practice essentially, So what I needed to do was pretty much minimal, but teaching hospital, we are expected to and required to ensure the safety of the patient at all times. So I always review the record before the patient goes back. I'll meet the patient, talk to their family. And I was actually, this on the third floor where we have our pre-op area in the ORs. And I was there when the pager went off about the shooting victim coming in. And then you start getting a couple of other pages.
Before we get into that point, were you aware that there was protesting going on in the city of Dallas?
Yeah, I knew that there was a peaceful protest downtown.
Okay.
Even before I...
Did they tell you to be on alert for any reason? Or
No, not at all.
Okay.
And I think people need to remember that this is July 7th, on July 6th, there was the shooting of Philando Castile in Minnesota that was broadcast on Facebook Live. So you watch Mr. Castile bleeding out in front of his car, in the front seat of his car, I should say. On July 5th, there was a shooting of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge. So, July 5th, death. July 6th, a death. July 7th, there is the peaceful protest in downtown Dallas, which was in response to those shootings.
So these are shootings by police officers to black males.
Right.
So obviously, powder keg material, tensions are high.
When I wasn't at the protest. From what I understand afterwards, there was the protest was peaceful, and there was a lot of camaraderie downtown between the protesters and law enforcement that was there. There was the shooter, Micah Johnson, who was there and had other ideas about how he wanted to express his protest. So I was aware that there was a protest going on downtown when I went to work. And when things like this happen, you always assume that you're going to get, some drunk that was in a fight or some minor accident that would come from some kind of incident like that. That happens when you have large sporting events, NASCAR's in town, things like that. So that was what I was expecting might happen that night.
Okay, so things are kind of cool that evening then, based on what you're saying. You're getting ready to do an appendectomy. Patient's getting wheeled back. Did he even make it that far?
No, he wasn't even getting wheeled back. I was literally seeing him for pre-op while they're getting the OR ready.
Then what happened?
And then the page goes off.
And I know it's been over a year. I'm sure you don't remember specifically what came on your pager, but you get a page that there's a
gunshot victim coming in, and I don't remember the details of the page. I cleared out my pager that next morning. I wanted them all off my pager. I didn't ever want to see those pages again. And
I definitely understand that.
But typically,
but getting a gunshot page on your pager is not that big. I'm not saying that not a big deal, but it's just one of those things where we see that quite often, and you just get ready to go downstairs to the trauma bay and get your mind right, get your ABCs ready to go, figure out what your plan of action is going to be, and that's
important because at the time when this happens, this is something we've trained to do, and you fall back in your training. I just became hyper focused on doing what I've been trained to do, which was when there's a gunshot victim come in, I go through my ATLS and do what you can to save those patients. All these other social issues that were important to this event were not a factor, at that time when we're providing our care. It's about providing the best unbiased care that you provide to any patient. And it's a world-class center.
Adrenaline is going. You ain't got time to think about all that stuff.
And I'm not by myself. There's a team of nurses and residents, and we have emergency medicine colleagues that are there, and anesthesiology arrived as well.
So you get downstairs. You're walking towards the trauma bay. Did you get any additional pages from that time you left the OR area?
But there were more pages that came through from the time it took me to come down from the third floor to the first floor.
So at that moment, you're getting additional pages that additional people have been shot.
Correct.
Now, are you at this point because sometimes they send pages, like a repeat page or a page in error. Like these are actual. This is a different patient who's coming in.
There was no confusion, at least on my part, that these were not separate patients that were coming in. But you're right. Sometimes it can be confusing if this is an update for the first patient or if this is a new patient. It was very clear that this was not the case then.
Did you think this is out of the ordinary? Because you're at Parkland. You get multiple gunshot wounds all the time. Were you?
No, this is not at all.
Okay, all right.
This is, like you said, this is Parkland Hospital. We handle multi-casualty events. We're trained for that. There was never any concern that we have more of this time. We can't handle this.
Gotcha. Okay.
The team goes into action immediately. They know their jobs and they start flexing as necessary.
Okay. All right. So you get down there and you see a police officer being wheeled into the trauma bay.
So I arrived to the trauma center, and as I come around the corner, I meet the first patient, and there's others coming. So this is all happening at the same time. The team is doing what they're trained to do. I split up the team to go handle the multiple patients, and then become hyper focused on what I can do to save these patients. Mm-hmm. We all have a job. We all know what we're supposed to do, and just went right to work.
You're taking care of patients. You have your fellows taking care of patients. You have ER attendings and ER residents taking care of patients. It's everybody is taking care of everybody as best as they can. Is there any moment when you're like, oh shit, this is crazy. This is not the usual night?
During the time we were providing patient care, those thoughts never crossed my mind. In times of crisis, you just become hyper focused on doing your job.
So you fall back on your training.
Yeah, I think you can appreciate that as a trauma surgeon. I think people in the military, first responders, when crisis hits, you don't don't stop and start worrying about all these other extraneous things. You become hyper focused. Your training kicks in, and you just do what you're supposed to do. Later, when we'd already gotten through all the critical moments and things like this, they're over in a few minutes, and you get more information about what happened, and it's when I realized how different this incident was from other shootings that had been occurring around the country. There's all these racial undertones that were an important part of the lead up, the actual event itself, and would become important in the aftermath as well.
And then not only those events, but just you being there also. I think that's something that's really important and poignant also. Okay, so obviously
that's also a good point. We have a dozen trauma surgeons, and of that group, I'm the only. When I was still working with them, I was the only African American in that group.
Right. And as much as we try to live in a vacuum, we're still, as physicians, we're still humans, right? And,
right.
So obviously this is still very difficult for you. This is obviously over a year later, and there's tension even with us talking.
Right.
Palpable tension with us talking. It's a difficult situation for you.
I think it's really important for people that don't do this to understand that when this is happening, our team, that we're all just focused on doing our job. In spite of all the racial issues that surrounded this event, that was not a factor during that time, not one bit.
Mm-hmm.
Or the fact that these are police officers, that was not a factor in what we were trying to do at the time.
And the reason you've mentioned that twice already.
Right.
So for me, when I heard about this, I was in Pennsylvania. Everybody who's listening to the show was in their respective areas. I didn't get the sense that became an area of question. Now, the fact that you're bringing it up, did that ever get brought up that, well, you're an African-American physician, you're taking care of police officers, there's all this acrimony that's going on? Did it ever come up that someone started to question whether your work was affected by what happened previously at all?
Yeah, that question came up. I don't know how many emails I received after this event. Working at a public institution, my email is public it's online. You can look it up. So I received a lot of emails from individuals. I received a couple boxes worth of letters and gifts afterwards.
Mainly positive.
Yeah, mainly positive. If I were to just make an estimate, I would say 90%, 95% of what I received was positive. And I've been through all the emails. The mail itself, I have not been through all that. I've only been through maybe a dozen letters, and there's several hundreds worth of letters to go through. And the reason I had not gone through all those was, as I read them, it's emotional. I had to be in the right headspace to read these things. But to get back to your question, yes, that came up. I received comments such as, you should not be allowed to take care of white people. I received comments that I should not be allowed to take care of police officers. And there was also the other side. There was comments that said they were glad that I let these police officers die, which, I mean, I don't even know how to respond to.
You don't have to on this show.
A comment like that.
Yeah, and it sounds like you didn't, and you don't have to on this show. So why don't let's go a little bit further then. Unfortunately, 3 police officers passed away. Let their souls rest in peace. You went to the operating room with one. You couldn't save him, unfortunately. You have
So I didn't take that officer to the OR. I stayed down in the trauma center because there was more patients coming in. We had 7 officers come in. So that patient, I transitioned to one of my partners who took him to the OR.
Okay, we will. Obviously, after 24 hours later has passed. However time has passed, there are all these different emotions that are kind of going through your mind. Then comes the press conference, right? There's a press conference. CNN is going to be there. Fox, all these different news outlets are going to be there. Now, from what I heard, rumor is that you initially did not even want to be at this press conference. Is that even true?
Oh, yeah, that's correct. When I was notified about the press conference, I had no intention of being there. I didn't want to be up in front of cameras talking about this event. It was and still is the worst night of my professional career. And I just didn't want to be there. I don't explain. I didn't want to be talking about it.
Now, in terms of, I mean, even after that night, that you get to go home and you get to decompress, and obviously a whole bunch of different feelings. Did you get a chance to talk? Did you talk to your wife about what happened? Did she ask, like, tell me everything that happened? Like, or is it one of those things you come home and you go straight to bed and that's it? You don't even turn the TV on or anything like that?
Well, it's initially, and I'm not sure if this, initially I tried to wall that off, compartmentalize that, and just move on. And that was a long night. I was there much of the next day, and actually that night, I remember I think we had to go to a birthday party for a friend of my daughter's. So I had to go do that. I can't stop at this point. And then the next day, I went back to work, and I was there at work the next day as well.
So the press conference is like about 4 days later?
3 days. Happened on Monday, so 4 days later.
4 days later.
So I didn't stop and really try to process this. Although it was, it's going on in my mind. It's there. It's kind of bubbling. But I didn't intentionally stop by and say, Brian, this happened. What do you think about it? Nor did I have any significant discussions with my wife that I can recall. I don't remember. This is all. It's still kind of a fuzzy time for me.
Okay, so you eventually decide that you're going to go to the press conference. You go to the go ahead.
Yeah. So this is my wife made me go to the press conference. Okay, when I heard about that, we were texting and talking. I just said, yeah, they're having this press conference, and I'm not going to go. And I say this, talking about my wife. I said, she will describe herself as a very supportive spouse. I told her she's a very directive spouse, and she said, "Oh, you're going to go to that press conference," and she had very good reasoning, which I just wasn't appreciating at the time. Is because of this event, you have a peaceful protest protesting police misconduct against black men. You have a black shooter that is targeting white police officers. That mix right there is an important thing that cannot be overlooked. Then you have me, the only black surgeon in this group of trauma surgeons that is working the night that he initially was not supposed to work, involved with this event, trying to save these police officers. And her reasoning was like, look, you have to at least be on camera to be seen. People need to see that there was a black man trying to save these police officers, which, when I look back at it now, it makes complete sense. At the time, I was like, I do not want to go. This really bothers me. And she says, like, if you break down and lose it on TV, I'll still support you. But like, you're going to that, you're going to that press conference.
Okay, so you're there and everybody's talking. You had no plans of talking, right?
No, I had no intention. I was just going to be a visible presence for the press.
So the mic is just going from representative of Parkland to another representative to surgeon. Are you at some point like what are you thinking at this moment? Because look, CNN is there, Fox is there, BBC News is there, New York Times is there, Dallas Morning News is there, lights, camera, action, everybody's there. The whole world is looking at you. You're not speaking though. Everybody else is speaking. What's going through your mind?
So what's going through my mind, I'm listening to how the press conference is progressing. And I hear the discussions about, the hospital's response, what we did, the number of patients we saw. Yeah, you've seen these before. It's there's a script you go through. That's probably not fair to say there's a script you go through, but we're going through all the standard things you talk about after a multiple casualty event. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, this time it's different. There is something very different about this event that we are not addressing. And I felt it was, this was fueled by this refusal to openly and honestly discuss how racism is impacting our society.
So this is going through your mind as like Representative 1 is talking, Representative 2.
Not initially, but as I start hearing how it's going,
right,
that starts going through my head. Right.
Okay. All right. So
and it sounds, and this is going on. This happens in a split second.
Right.
And then
so the microphone is coming closer.
Well,
or they're coming towards asking you.
There was only one person talking at the time, and I don't know. I've not watched this press conference yet, so I'm not sure. I still don't know how it got to me. Was it passed to me, or did they go down the line?
I think you got asked the question. And that's where I want to go next with this. Is you said before that there's a script, or in essence, there's a way to handle these things, right? So you've already been prepped. At this point, just so the listeners know, you have quote unquote a handler, someone who handles media for the hospital, who's kind of No, at that moment, no.
Oh wow. No.
Okay, so you are Brian H. Williams.
Yes.
You are I'm a trauma surgeon, and I've gone through the worst night of my life. And this is unfiltered thoughts in your head, and someone asks you a question.
Right.
All of these news stations.
Yeah. I was just there to sit there. I was just there to sit there, Dr. Darko. I was there to sit there and look good on the camera. That was it. I had no intent of speaking. I don't know if anybody expected me to actually speak. There was no plan for that. I was going to sit there. We have people that talk. There's people that they are the speakers. And when we're done, just get up and walk out.
Right. So they're looking at you and they ask you a question, and in essence, the entire world is looking at you, wanted to know what you're going to say. And if I may, I have a quote. I'm going to paraphrase what you said, and I'm going to read it, and I want you to tell me your thoughts afterwards. This is an opportunity for you to just speak about what happened that night. And I think the majority of people would just say, this is what happened, and we did this, we did X, we did Y, and kind of move on. But you say this is not an average mass casualty event. And you said, in essence, this has been very personal for me and a turning point in my life. There was the added dynamic of officers being shot. We routinely care for multiple gunshot victims, but the preceding days, which is what you're talking about, of more black men dying at the hands of police officers affect me. I abhor what has been done to these officers, and I grieve with their families. I understand the anger and frustration and distrust of law enforcement, but they are not the problem. The problem is the lack of open discussions about the impact of race relations in this country. And I want the Dallas police to also see me as a black man, and that I support you, I will defend you, I will care for you. That doesn't mean that I don't fear you. So take us to literally, after that, what's going through your mind? What's the faces of the journalists after you say that comment?
So I'll speak a little bit first about before that, and then answer your question after. Before I spoke, I thought to myself, something needs to be said about race and police interactions with black men. And I also thought to myself, not only does it have to be said, if it's not said now, it'll never be said. And if it's not said by me, no one's ever going to say it. This is not going to happen. And I also just accepted that once I open my mouth and say this, I'm going to get fired.
You can't take it back.
There's just no way. That was what I just assumed that was going to happen. Like, you say this, you're going to get fired. Because I wasn't there to talk about.
So, dude, you got to be sweating through your armpits right now, and like.
Well, this happens. When you and I are talking about this, we talk about this over minutes, right?
Right.
Everything that we discussed happened in my head in a split second. That all that reasoning and logic and thinking about the outcomes is a split second, and then the mic's in front of your face. If that's the case, and I'm going to speak, and what you just read is what I said. I had no intention of saying that on that day. I had no expectation of the impact it would have and what would happen. And just so you understand, I'm an extremely private person, media shy, certainly not media savvy. At that point, I've kind of had a crash course in interacting with the media since then. But it's just not something I wanted to do. Even when I was asked to interact with the media, at that time I would deflect that to others that I worked with. It just wasn't what I was into.
When did afterwards, the press conference is over? Obviously, this is reverberating through the United States, whether it's via Twitter, social media, the news circuit. When did you find out that, like, oh, snap, like this, what I just said is literally like people are talking about this and this is going to be a lot bigger than what I anticipated it to be, in essence?
So when I left that press conference, when I left the room of the press conference, I did a couple of other interviews immediately in the back room there. As far as how this had reverberated throughout the country and just with social media and the news, I had no idea. I had none.
You didn't even have a Facebook account, so how would you know?
I still don't have a Facebook account. And I did not watch the news for days. I didn't want to see this rehash over the next few days, which I assumed was going to happen, the event itself. I didn't listen to the radio. When I drove to and from work, the radio was off. So I was calm out for a few days. I was disconnected from the matrix. I had no idea what was happening. And I don't know if it was days or weeks. People were telling me what had happened. But I started having a sense of what was going on when strangers were walking up to me, saying, "Hey, are you that doctor?" And then they would say, "Thank you for saying what you said," or "I never thought about things that way until I heard you say it," or people would want to take selfies, which was unusual during that time. I just wasn't in the mood to smile, so there are a lot of selfies out there with me just stone faced, just standing there.
It's understandable.
Next to people.
It's understandable.
I was, approached in the airport. It was just everywhere. I started handling like this. Yeah, this is big.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would start getting friends that would start taking screenshots of stuff on Facebook and sending it to me, or starting getting emails.
I texted you that same when you made that comment.
Right.
I remember texting you, and I didn't hear anything from you for a couple of days, and I was like, well, he's probably going through his stuff. I didn't know it was like that.
Well, it was two things. I was going through my stuff,
right,
and then my phone just blew up.
Yeah.
There was no way to go through all those text messages in a timely manner. I don't even know if I ever really responded to everybody that texted me. Because I think if you have my number, that means we're pretty close, right? So I should respond to that in a timely manner.
No, you're going through your stuff, man. This is a very extraordinary, not the average stuff, And
right.
So in essence, right, you did the whole TV news circuit. You were on CNN. You did something with Don Lemon. You even got a chance to meet President Obama, you and your wife. You got to participate in a town hall. All of that stuff is well documented, right? That stuff is well documented,
right,
obviously, and you're going through a flurry of emotions during that time. If I may, let's fast forward a little bit.
Okay.
And if I may paraphrase, in essence, you kind of just went back to being Dr. Brian H. Williams, saving lives, taking care of people, working at Parkland, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So then that's 2016. All of a sudden, you blitz, the social media world again, not on purpose, but there's a post from your website, in essence, saying that you are leaving Parkland Hospital, you are resigning.
Right.
What? Why? Like, this is what, July, June of 2017, you're out.
July 15th was my last day. That's the day I resigned.
And there's so many different, and this is the reason why you're here. There's so many different stories as to why you left.
Right.
So this is an opportunity for you. Please tell us what's going through your mind. Like, someone like you literally are at one of the top training facilities in the country.
Right.
You're taking care of indigent populations. You're doing everything that you've always wanted to do. You're at the hospital where, unfortunately, JFK passed away.
Right.
This, at one point, was the White House or the Oval Office for a couple of minutes, back in the 60s. So, like, in terms of history, in terms of tradition, in terms of, where you want to go in the trajectory, this is the job that you want. Yet, you walked away from it.
Man.
My man, what happened?
Yeah, well, yeah, you're right. This was the dream job, and I was saddened to leave it. It combined everything that I wanted to do when I thought about my career as a doctor when it comes to teaching residents and students and the clinical work I did at the hospital. It certainly was not an easy decision, but it wasn't a rash decision either. It's been a few years even prior to the shooting when I had been considering leaving.
Why is that?
Just there are a number of reasons. When it comes down to is when I thought about where I wanted to be and the contributions I wanted to make to the patients in Dallas and contributions I wanted to make to the profession of medicine, I had to ask myself, is what I'm doing is that a viable path to achieving that? And if it wasn't, what about it was preventing that from happening? And could I change those things? And if I had no ability to change that, then I had to really decide, do I want to stay here or move on? And for literally years, I continued to tell myself that I can make this work for these very reasons we discussed. I was very attached to the residents here, the medical students that I worked with, and the work I did at the hospital, as well as the people I worked with at the hospital. When the shooting occurred, and my experience after the shooting, the year up until my resignation, my transformation and what I thought about myself as a surgeon, teacher, and as a black man, I can no longer make excuses to myself about why it was okay for me to continue when I did not feel that path would allow me to do what I wanted to do for the profession and for society. And that's when I decided, okay, Brian, you just need to cut the umbilical cord.
Okay. All right. I mean, then, but that's the truth, though. I mean, in essence,
it's the truth. And the reality is,
because
a few months before the shooting, I was actually interviewing for a job a few months before the shooting occurred.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is not like a Jerry Maguire moment where, like, the night before you hand in your resignation letter, you are like writing up what you're gonna write, your manifesto, and you're just gonna pop it on them the next day. Like, this is something that you've kind of had in your mind for years.
Right.
For whatever reason, you kind of suppressed it. You lasted another year, and then
right.
You had your moment.
Right. I mean, and the reality is, if this shooting is tragic and the ripple effects about who's been affected by that, we will never know. Mm. But the reality is, from all that grief and suffering I went through, and I'm still going through some things now. The growth that occurred from that as well. I really had to think, like, what am I going to do with my time while I'm on this earth?
In essence, you wanted to think outside the box. You want to be a doc outside the box.
Right. Like you said, I wanted to be exactly. I can't even say it any better than that. And I think what's difficult for a lot of people to, and I hate to put thoughts in other people's minds, but just based on some of the comments I received, why would you leave this? Why would you leave? But I guess the thing that really challenged people was that I didn't have a job lined up.
Right. Yeah.
I wasn't leaving to go to another job.
So you went from being Dr. Trauma, Dr. Brian Williams, to literally Dr. Mom.
Exactly. I had no job, and people, you and I, we can get jobs pretty easily because
there's such a shortage.
There's such a shortage of people that do what we do. So there was never any question about, could I work somewhere I could easily get a job? But I know the worst thing I could have done was to take a job somewhere else, uproot my family, and move to this other job without really thinking through if that's what I want to do. But it was necessary for me to take a step back and just put everything on pause. And I was fortunate that I was in a position where I could do that for a while. You got to have that cushion, 3 to 6 months money that you have saved
Hey,
up.
you've been listening to the show. Okay, so you took a little bit of some personal finance advice. You had about 3 to 6 months of an emergency fund, also known as the FU money, right? I'm out, right? I'm sure that's what was on your mind.
Yeah.
And in essence, you had some time alone to kind of think about things, and so that takes us to our next point right now, which is what you're working on right now, right? So right now, obviously, you're still going to practice, you're still going to do trauma surgery, but you see yourself, you see your life going in a little bit of a different direction, right? Like you're speaking not just on, acrimony in the Black community, so to speak, but you're actually grassroots. You're talking not only to police departments and police officers, but you're also talking to underserved communities and ways in which people can work together. So you're putting your money where your mouth is, and you're walking the talk in essence.
Right. That is one of the unexpected outcomes of this is becoming a public speaker. And it was really only a few months ago where I was actually able to say that I am a public speaker without it feeling weird. Again, private person, did not consider myself a public speaker. Pretty much avoided that sort of attention. But after July 7th and what happened in the aftermath, I received a lot of invitations to go speak about my experience. And the invitations came from a variety of requesters. Obviously there were many medical centers and hospitals that invited me. But there's also churches and colleges and high schools, industry conferences, law enforcement conferences. So it was a wide variety of people I was talking to. And I assumed that this would go for a few months and then
fade away,
and I'd be able to go back to my previous life.
You make a lot of wrong assumptions.
Yeah, it continued to continue, and it still continues to grow. This speaking. So literally this past summer, I was having lunch with one of my friends here in Dallas. This is when I was not working, and I said, "Hey, I'm unemployed. I don't know what I'm going to do." And he's like, "You're not unemployed. You're a public speaker. Like, you need to embrace that. That's what you do." Mm-hmm. So when I continue to speak, whomever wants to have this discussion about racism and violence and social equity, but I also talk quite a bit about resilience after adverse events. And no matter what I'm doing, I'm sharing my story because there's power in testimonials, and it's uncomfortable for me to be that open with people whom I don't know, but I recognize that it's actually having an impact. So that's why I continue to do that. The feedback I get is overwhelmingly positive. Not everyone agrees with what I'm saying, but the discussion
is happening.
Is happening.
And however uncomfortable it is, hopefully it's progressing.
Right.
So, what are we going to expect to see from you? I know you don't have a glass ball, a crystal ball, whatever you call it, whatever the pun is. What's the 3-year plan, or I don't know what, I don't even know if you're even looking that far. What do you expect to do in the next 3 months? Because I know there's thoughts of a foundation. Right. There's thoughts of possibly something more than that. Like what else is in store for you?
Well, first I'm now back at Parkland Hospital as a full-time employee running their community health institute. Or sorry, I shouldn't say that. I'm the medical director, so I'm not running it. There's a team there. I still have a boss over there. Mm-hmm. But for me, for Brian Williams, the outside the box part will be to continue certainly public speaking. I have things booked out in 2019 already. So next year, about half the year is full, then a couple things in 2019. So the expectation that would stop and I can go back is not happening. And it's not a complaint. I'm just saying, okay, Brian, this is what you have to do. And I actually enjoy it now, and I'm embracing it. It's still tough, but that part will continue. The other thing that Brian Williams will do is I'm working right now with some people to start a foundation. And we're in the very beginning stages of all this, but it will be a mechanism to address societal issues that are important to me when it comes to social inequities that span the gamut of healthcare, of course, education, housing, criminal justice, and that's a lot to bite off.
It is.
But, there are a lot of people out there that are doing work, so I hope that I can partner with them. And
if they say if you're not being ambitious, they're not big enough, right?
Right. So I'm very excited about the opportunities, and I can't tell you that I can see clearly down the road, but I know that I have no fear about taking these chances, and it's the most liberated I've felt in my life in a long time as far as my professional career, but also for me as a person to live a life that's authentic, that's in line with my ethos and who I feel I truly am.
I love that answer. Well, listen, Brian, we are getting towards the end of the interview.
That was fast.
It goes fast.
Oh my gosh.
It goes fast. We went through a gamut of emotions and but this is a quick moment where I always take my guests through some quick, fast questions. Okay. So you ready to do this? I'm going to ask you some questions. You just think of the first thing that comes to your mind. Don't overthink it. All right. If it don't worry. If it comes out bad, I'll just edit it out. Right? That's a lie. I tell everybody all the time. I'm not going to edit it out.
All right. Let's go.
Let's do this. All right. So what's one thing you want people to learn from this podcast?
So one thing I want people to learn from this podcast is to live a life of authenticity, and that requires you to have some fearlessness and courage about opening yourself up to others and showing them the parts of yourself that you generally try to keep hidden, because with that it is freeing to you, but it also has impact on people that hear your story. And you have an opportunity to really positively impact the lives of many people beyond yourself.
Love it. I love that answer. So knowing what you know now, look, you're a child of the 80s, right? You know what I'm saying? You grew up in the 80s. You knew about Back to the Future. Let's say you, Dr. Brian Williams, right now, woke Dr. Brian Williams, got an opportunity to go back and give yourself advice as a pre-med. What's one piece of advice you would give yourself?
Right, so we know I was never pre-med.
Oh, yeah, that's true. How about this? Let's do this. Let's do med student Dr. Williams. How about that?
If I talk to med student Dr. Williams, I would say, Brian, do not forget to make time for your family and friends. It is so easy to get immersed in medical school and all those obligations that you forget to make those phone calls, take time to hang out. And I did it. And there are people that I've lost track of over the past couple decades that I would like to just say hi and thank you.
Appreciate that. What's one life hack or a piece of technology that you're using right now that makes your life easier?
Well, my life hack is that when I schedule my work days, I schedule it in 15-minute increments.
Really?
15 minutes.
Is that from the military?
No, it's not from the military. I saw this on a life hack website or something online. I was like, because you think about it, you schedule, okay, I'm gonna have a half an hour meeting.
See, if you didn't say that, you could have been like, that's like the Brian Williams approach.
No, I'm not going to take credit for something that's not mine, but I read that and I'm like, that makes sense. You schedule a half an hour meeting and then you meet for 10 minutes and it's 20 minutes wasted. So I'm like, You know what?
This podcast was only supposed to be like 30 minutes. I'm just messing with you.
Right. 15 minutes. And then if you 15 minutes is what you have your time for, that way you don't waste time throughout the day, you know, but lunches, I'll schedule, more time for that and more important meetings, but throughout the day, don't schedule half an hour for a phone call. How long does that really take? 10, 15 minutes, and you're done, you can move on.
Got you. All right, that's a good answer. I like that, actually. I actually may incorporate that into my life. What's one thing that you are proud of that nobody else knows about?
One thing that I'm proud of that nobody else knows about. I'm proud that I recognize now how important time is with my family. Because I really admit that when I took the job as a trauma surgeon, I was happy to be done with my training. I'm out on my own. Being in trauma attending is the greatest job in the world, and I was just completely immersed in being at the hospital, teaching residents and students. That was all I did, and my time with my family suffered as a result. And I'm glad that now I'm proud that now I've recognized that time is very important, and I'm very focused on ensuring that I minimize how external obligations impact my time with my family.
I want you to finish this. I'm not just a doc. I'm a
surgeon activist.
Damn, I haven't had that one before. I like that one. One, man. That's a good one. That's a really good one. Well, look, Dr. Brian Williams, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk on this show. I know that you've done the circuit. You've talked about this story, however emotional it is, multiple times. But there's nothing like getting a chance to kind of tell your story the way how you want to tell it.
Right.
And, I just want to acknowledge you for a whole host of things. Not only obviously being a mentor to me when I was early in my training and helping me to kind of look a little bit further and looking, at more competitive programs, which had a really big effect on me as to my trajectory and where I was going to go. But also at the same time, there are points in our life when we can look back and say, are we really proud of that opportunity or that event? Or is this an opportunity where, you may not be so proud of yourself? You had literally everybody looking and waiting on every word that you were going to say. And that would have been an opportunity for you to kind of take the quote unquote safe route. You decided not to, and you decided to speak your heart. And I think, a lot of people would have just been okay with taking the safe route. And whatever reverberations, whatever, feedback and criticism that you got from that, you've kind of just rolled with it, and you've become, for me, someone that I'm really proud to say that I know, and someone I'm proud to say is a friend as well as now a mentor. And I just want to acknowledge you for saying what you said. I know it was very difficult at that moment. I know you probably felt like you were on an island. I know you probably felt there was a bunch of heat on your head and everything, maybe on your ears. But that was up. And that was one of the proudest moments I ever felt at that time. Because in essence, I think we all kind of feel like we can compartmentalize our lives and be like we're in a vacuum. But sometimes it's okay to say we're human and, we feel a certain way. And I just want to say, thank you very much for speaking up like that. You spoke up for a lot of people who felt the same way. And, with you working with various police officers and police divisions, you're giving equal time to each side, and you're trying to be a healer as opposed to someone who's dividing. And I just want to say, I acknowledge you for what you're doing. I hope you continue to do, great things. And it's amazing to see your arc. And it's amazing, even mid-career, to see someone be able to do a 180-degree turn. And I can't wait to see what you're going to do in the next 3 to 5 years. Thank you very much for being on Docs Outside the Box.
Oh man, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Oh yeah, man. This was a lot of fun.
No, I'm proud of you. This has been awesome.
Real quick before we go, let's take an opportunity for people to find out where they can meet you, where they can find out more about you, where they can read about your blogs. Take a moment to go ahead and tell us about that.
Oh yeah, so I have a blog. It's at brianwilliamsmd.com. That's Brian with an I. I'm pretty active on Twitter, BHWilliamsMD. I'm sorry, I still do not have a Facebook page.
When you come into Facebook and when you come into Instagram, man.
Well, we'll see. Right now I'm just doing it myself. So Twitter and my blog site is. Oh, I'm also on LinkedIn as well. I'm on LinkedIn. So. Hey man, I told you I'm a private kind of person. This is a big deal for me.
Got you. And that's a wrap. Another great episode is over. This one, I'm really interested to hear what the feedback is on this one. I really enjoyed talking to Dr. Brian Williams. And actually, like I said earlier in the show, this is the first time that I flew out to go meet a guest and actually do a one-on-one live interview. I'm looking forward to doing more of these interviews. I think it's a lot more personable than doing it online. But either way, I'm going to still keep giving you great episodes. Keep listening. Share this episode with others. I think the easiest way is to share it through Instagram. But if you don't know anybody who's on Instagram, share it with email, share it with Twitter, share it with Facebook. I would really appreciate that. And then also, as always, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Play and Stitcher Radio. So I'm going to catch you on the next episode. But before I jet, remember one thing. We only got one life. Let's make it count and live outside the box. Peace.